The rhetoric coming from the White House regarding the military conflict with Iran has shifted from diplomatic pressure to an explicit warning. In a recent post on Truth Social, Donald Trump published an image of Iranian territory being bombed alongside the caption, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." That escalation abroad translates directly to pain at the pump for everyday Americans. With the administration predicting an extended blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, the flow of international oil has slowed down, driving Brent crude toward record highs and rapidly emptying the wallets of local consumers. To maintain this military posture, the administration has proposed a massive financial solution, increasing the Pentagon's budget to a record $1.5 trillion. That request represents an annual defense increase of $445 billion. The federal budget is a zero-sum equation. When you suddenly require nearly $500 billion new dollars a year for the military, the math forces you to extract that money from somewhere else. During a private luncheon, the president was quite clear about where those cuts would be made, stating, "We're fighting wars. It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicare." This shift moves the financial burden of global military expansion onto specific domestic programs like Medicare and daycare, turning geopolitical strategy into a direct withdrawal from the services families rely on every day. The architect behind this spending surge is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who argues that navigating today's complex global threats requires raw, unparalleled military dominance, funded by that $1.5 trillion budget. A major part of Hegseth's vision relies on massive, high-ticket hardware purchases, including the construction of a brand-new class of battleships dubbed the Golden Fleet, which are estimated to cost taxpayers up to $13 billion each. But that aggressive expansion is facing severe internal friction. Vice President JD Vance has begun privately questioning whether the United States can actually endure a prolonged conflict. Vance's concerns center on the quality of intelligence coming out of the Pentagon. He has raised questions about whether the military is artificially inflating its success metrics against Iran, while simultaneously hiding the billions of dollars it will take to repair heavily damaged U.S. bases across the Middle East. When the vice president and the Pentagon cannot agree on the basic math of victory or the cost of repairs, the entire argument for the war's sustainability begins to pull apart at the highest levels of the White House. This graph tracks the projected national debt, and it highlights a grim macroeconomic consequence. If Congress approves this new baseline defense spending, the debt will spike upward by $5.8 trillion over the next decade. Over that same 10-year period, the military increase alone will cost an additional $4.5 trillion. To understand the trade-offs involved, we have to look at what that exact pool of capital could solve here at home. For example, $1.8 trillion from that pool is enough to completely eradicate the country's housing shortage, funding the construction of 4 million affordable units. Another $920 billion could fully protect Medicaid, ensuring that 10 million Americans don't lose their access to basic health insurance. And $225 billion could permanently cap childcare costs for every working family in the United States. Spending $13 billion on a single battleship while millions of Americans face housing shortages and rising childcare costs marks a definitive pivot toward foreign intervention at the expense of domestic stability. Making matters more expensive, the United States is being forced to shoulder this trillion-dollar burden entirely on its own as international alliances begin to fracture. Key European partners are explicitly pulling back. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently declared that he will never let his country be dragged into an open-ended war that does not serve their interests. This isolation creates a legal deadline under the 1973 War Powers Resolution Act, which restricts any president from conducting a war for more than 60 days without the consent of Congress. Once that 60-day window expires, the ultimate authority shifts out of the Oval Office and into the Capitol building, where Congress is legally mandated to hold a vote. That vote leaves lawmakers with a stark binary choice: officially authorize an endless trillion-dollar war or force a geopolitical retreat to save the domestic economy. It challenges Americans to look at their own communities and decide if the pursuit of global military dominance is worth the systemic pressure placed on their local housing, healthcare, and infrastructure.